Chapter 1: The Silent Struggle. Raha was born in a small Punjabi village, a place where life moved at its own pace, unbothered by the rush of the outside world. The village was surrounded by green fields, and the sounds of nature and the hum of everyday life were her constant companions. People in her village spoke Punjabi, and English was a foreign language, often viewed as something for the educated or for those who ventured far beyond their small community. Raha's family, though humble, placed immense value on education, especially for their daughter, believing that knowledge could unlock opportunities beyond their surroundings. From a young age, Raha was curious and bright, a quick learner who excelled in her studies. Her teachers noticed her exceptional academic performance early on, and she was often praised for her ability to read and write in English, even though the language was not commonly spoken around her. She could decipher the letters on the pages of her textbooks with ease, and her essays often earned her the top marks in class. In a world where children were more likely to play outside than study English, Raha stood out as a beacon of potential. But there was a problem. Despite her excellent reading and writing skills, Raha could not speak English confidently. Her school books and worksheets gave her the knowledge, but the words did not flow from her mouth the way they did for others. This was something she did not fully understand. Why was it so hard to speak the language? She could read and write so fluently. The truth was, in her village, there was no need for English conversation. The language was simply something to study, something for exams. There were no daily conversations in English to build fluency. The elders around her, even if they knew a few words of English, never spoke it. In a way, the village had its own unspoken rule. English was not for daily use. It was something you learned for school, not for living. Raha didn't mind this much when she was young, thinking that her talent in reading and writing was all she needed. But as she grew older, that started to change. In high school, the pressure to perform in all subjects became greater. English, however, was still her weakest area, despite her proficiency in writing and reading. She would perform well on exams, scoring highly on essays, but when it came to speaking in class, she would freeze. She feared the judgment of her classmates, many of whom spoke English fluently, often mocking her for her thick Punjabi accent. Her teacher once asked her to read a passage from a book aloud in front of the class, and as she opened her mouth, her words caught in her throat. Her classmates laughed, and the embarrassment washed over her like a wave. The sound of her own voice seemed foreign to her, too thick with the accents of her village, too hesitant. The humiliation stung. She tried to speak in class again and again, but each time, the fear of being judged overtook her, and she kept silent. Her classmates moved on, their confidence growing, while she retreated further into herself. Raha was not someone who could easily express her emotions, and her struggle with English became something she hid from everyone, even her family. She would go home after school, burying her head in her textbooks, attempting to practice speaking in private, in the safety of her room. But it felt as though the gap between her written English and spoken English was widening, and the harder she tried to close it, the more frustrating it became. By the time she reached college, her fear had escalated into something more profound. She had been accepted into a prestigious institution outside of her village, an accomplishment that filled her with both pride and dread. She was leaving behind her small community, her parents, and the familiar faces of her classmates, all for a new world where expectations were higher, and the language of success was English. She had always dreamed of studying in a college where the best minds gathered, but now that she was on the threshold, she realized just how unprepared she felt. The students here spoke fluently, effortlessly switching between debates, discussions, and casual conversations. Raha felt like an outsider, lost in a sea of words she couldn't quite grasp. The first few weeks were torturous. Every time she entered a room or sat in a group, the chatter around her felt like a blur, an avalanche of sounds she couldn't keep up with. Her classmates discussed everything, from politics to movies, speaking in rapid, perfect English. Raha could follow the conversation to some extent, but when it was her turn to speak, she was at a loss. She felt her throat tighten, and no matter how hard she tried, the words just wouldn't come out the way she wanted them to. She had become so accustomed to being the quiet one in the back of the room, only contributing when absolutely necessary. But here, that was not enough. She felt invisible, a shadow in a crowd that was effortlessly communicating with each other. Her heart would race, her palms would sweat, and the words she had worked so hard to master seemed to escape her at the most crucial moments. She remembered the first time she was asked to present in class. Her heart pounded in her chest as she stood in front of a room full of strangers. Her mind went blank, and when she opened her mouth, only a few stilted words came. out. The fear in her eyes was evident to everyone, and the silence that followed only made it worse. The professor gave her a weak smile, but the embarrassment she felt lingered long after the class ended. It wasn't just the public speaking that terrified her. During group projects, when discussions flowed easily among her peers, Raha found herself in the background. She would sit silently, unable to contribute. Even though she had ideas, she had opinions, but her lack of fluency in English kept her from expressing them. Her classmates didn't know what she was going through, but she could see their disappointment when she would hesitate before speaking, or worse, stay quiet. They assumed she was either uninterested or incapable. The rejection, though unintentional, crushed her spirit. The final blow came during her placement interviews in her final year. Raha had worked hard throughout her college years, earning good grades, developing technical expertise, and contributing to her field of study. But when it came to the interviews, the same issue arose: her inability to speak confidently in English. Despite her strong academic background, her interviewers focused on her lack of verbal communication skills. They praised her knowledge and technical abilities but noted that she would struggle to interact in a global environment if she couldn't communicate effectively in English. The words of rejection echoed in her mind long after she left the interview room. The self-doubt crept in again, and she questioned her worth. Why did it have to be like this? Why was English, a language she could read and write with ease, the very thing holding her back? The pressure of securing a job weighed heavily on her, and the failure of not being able to communicate properly in English felt like a barrier she couldn't overcome. In that moment of frustration, something inside Raha changed. Instead of succumbing to the feeling of helplessness, she made a decision: she would break this barrier. She would no longer allow her fear of speaking to dictate her future. She realized that the problem wasn't the language, it was the way she perceived her ability to speak it. This was her turning point, and she knew that she had to confront her fear head-on. The battle was not going to be easy. She had no immediate solutions, no magic fix. But she was determined to try. Little did she know, this commitment to improving her spoken English would change the course of her life forever. Chapter 2: The Road to Fluency. Raha's decision to change her life was not made lightly. It came from a place of deep frustration and self-doubt, but also from a burning desire to overcome the very thing that had held her back for years: the fear of speaking English. The rejection from her college interviews and the feeling of inadequacy in her own skin were enough to spark the drive for transformation. She had already proven herself in many areas, but this was the one hurdle she couldn't leap over. Raha's journey to fluency would not be fast. It was a slow, steady, and often painful process. She had no illusions about how difficult it would be, but she was committed to improving herself, and she was prepared to do whatever it took to overcome the obstacle in front of her. Her first step was to embrace the fear she had been running from for so long. She had to acknowledge that speaking English in public made her uncomfortable and insecure. This wasn't something to be ashamed of, but rather a hurdle she needed to jump over. Instead of avoiding situations where she might have to speak in English, Raha began to seek out. She knew that, to break the cycle, she had to confront her anxieties head on. Her first step was small, reading aloud every evening. After she came back from college, she would sit in front of a mirror and read out loud. She started with the books she was comfortable with, books she had read countless times before. At first, her voice wavered, and her mouth struggled to form the words. Her Punjabi accent slipped through with each syllable. But Raha did not let that discourage her. The goal was not perfection, it was practice. She recorded herself each time and listened to her own voice. At first, it sounded almost foreign to her. It wasn't the clear, crisp English of her classmates. But as the days went by, she started to feel the rhythm of the language. She practiced pronunciation, focusing on the sounds she struggled with most. The th sound, which was so common in English, became a major point of focus. She had always found it difficult, but after several weeks of consistent practice, she began to say it more naturally. Raha's first technique was simple repetition. She had learned this in her childhood while practicing her native language. The more you repeat something, the more natural it becomes. She did this with English, saying the same words over and over until her mouth began to move without hesitation. As she continued with her daily practice, Raha realized that there was more to fluency than simply practicing sounds and pronunciation. She had to think in English. For years, Raha had been translating every thought from Punjabi into English before speaking it. This process was slow and often caused her to stumble over her words. If she wanted to speak fluently, she had to stop translating altogether. To force herself to think in English, Raha began to narrate her day-to-day life. As she walked to the market, she would describe the things she saw. In English, "The sky is clear today," she would say to herself. "I see a man walking with a dog." It was an odd exercise at first, and it felt unnatural. But over time, the phrases started coming more easily. Her brain started associating everyday experiences with English, and soon it became a second nature to think in English. To enhance this practice, Raha also took up journaling. Every evening, she would write a short entry in English about her day. At first, her sentences were simple and awkward, but she gradually expanded her vocabulary. She would look up new words every day and incorporate them into her journal entries. The food was spicy, she wrote one evening. I felt energetic after the meal. Slowly but surely, her writing improved, and so did her ability to think in English. One of the most important steps in Raha's journey was immersing herself in English language content. Raha realized that reading and writing weren't enough. She had to hear the language being spoken in real life, to observe how it was used in conversations and different contexts. That was when she turned to movies, TV shows, and podcasts. Raha started watching English movies with subtitles. She began with movies she already knew well, so the context wouldn't be a problem. She would read the subtitles and pay attention to how the actors pronounced the words. She noted the speed of their speech, the pauses, and how they emphasized certain words. For a beginner like Raha, it wasn't just about understanding the story, it was about observing the flow of the language. One movie she watched repeatedly was The Pursuit of Happiness, starring Will Smith. The emotional depth of the film kept her engaged, and the clarity of the actors' speech made it easier for her to follow along. She started mimicking the dialogues, repeating them word for word. The goal wasn't to just understand what was happening on the screen, but to practice speaking along with it. She also listened to podcasts, particularly those aimed at English learners. These podcasts often broke down complex ideas into simpler language, allowing her to grasp vocabulary and grammar more easily. She would listen during her walks or while cooking, taking note of phrases or words that were new to her. These podcasts became a constant companion in her journey toward fluency. While practicing alone was important, Raha knew that speaking in front of others was key to building confidence. She decided to join an online English-speaking forum. It wasn't easy for her to speak with strangers, but the thought of practicing in a safe, judgment-free environment pushed her to take that first step. At first, she joined in on text-based conversations. Gradually, as she gained more confidence, she moved to voice-based chats. It felt like a small victory every time she managed to contribute to a conversation without hesitation. But the real challenge came when she joined group discussions. These were fast-paced, and the speakers didn't always slow down for her. At first, she would feel overwhelmed, unable to catch every word, and unsure if her responses were correct. But she pushed through. She asked others to slow down, to clarify, and they were more than willing to help. There was one particular session where Raha's fear almost got the better of her. A heated debate was going on, and the topic was something she felt passionate about. Her heart raced as she waited for a pause in the conversation, her mind trying to form a response in English. She hesitated, but then she remembered something she had read. Fluency is built on courage, not perfection. With this in mind, she took a deep breath and jumped in. She wasn't perfect, but she was understood. Her words weren't flawless, but her ideas came across clearly. That moment was a turning point. It was proof that she was capable of participating in discussions, even if it wasn't always with perfect grammar. To improve her fluency, Raha also focused on building her vocabulary. She understood that speaking English wasn't just about knowing a set of words but knowing when and how to use them. She began creating a vocabulary notebook, where she wrote down new words she encountered in her daily life or while watching movies and listening to podcasts. For each word, she wrote its definition, synonyms, and an example sentence. She found that the more she learned, the more she understood the nuances of the language. Some words had multiple meanings depending on the context, and some phrases didn't translate directly from Punjabi. Raha practiced these new words by using them in her conversations, ensuring they became part of her active vocabulary. She didn't just memorize the words, she used them in context, and that helped her remember them more effectively. Raha also took the time to learn common expressions and idioms that native speakers used in daily conversations. Phrases like "hit the nail on the head" or "under the weather" confused her at first, but once she understood them, she felt more at ease in conversations. She started incorporating these phrases into her speech, which made her sound more natural and fluent. Raha's next challenge was real-life application. She knew she had to start using English in her everyday interactions to truly internalize the language. She made a point to engage with her friends in English. She would initiate conversations in English, and if they corrected her, she didn't feel embarrassed. Instead, she saw it as an opportunity to improve. She began applying her learning in her professional life as well. In college, she started presenting her projects in English. The first few times, her hands shook as she held the presentation clicker, and her voice quivered with fear. But as the weeks passed, the fear began to subside. She found herself speaking more confidently, organizing her thoughts in English, and even debating topics with her professors and peers. These experiences were invaluable because they gave her real-world practice in English, not just theoretical knowledge. One day, during a college seminar, Raha was asked to speak on a topic she was passionate about. It was a difficult subject, and she had to explain complex ideas in a clear and concise way. As she stood at the podium, she felt a wave of calm wash over her. This time, when she spoke, the words flowed easily. She wasn't translating them from Punjabi. She wasn't thinking about her accent or grammar. She was simply expressing herself in the language she had worked so hard to master. That moment, standing in front of her peers, was a culmination of all the hard work she had put into her English learning journey. She had become the confident, fluent speaker she had once dreamed of being. Raha's journey to fluency in English wasn't without its struggles. There were times when she wanted to give up, when the fear of speaking seemed overwhelming. But each day, she faced those fears head-on. She practiced relentlessly, sought opportunities for real-life application, and embraced the mistakes as part of her learning process. By the end of her journey, Raha had not only become fluent in English but had also transformed her own beliefs about herself. The shy, insecure girl who once felt invisible in a crowd had become a confident, eloquent speaker who could express her thoughts clearly in English. More than just mastering a language, Raha had mastered herself, her determination, resilience, and belief in her own abilities. And while her fluency in English was a testament to her hard work, it was only one part of her greater story. Her journey didn't end with fluency, it was merely the beginning of a new chapter, one that would see her share her experience with others, helping them conquer their own language barriers and find the confidence to speak. Chapter 3: Success Stories of Students. Raha's journey to fluency had been transformative not only for her, but also for the people she would go on to help. As she stood at the threshold of her new life, one where she could speak English confidently, fluently, and without hesitation, Raha realized that her struggle wasn't unique. Many others, whether from her hometown or from other places, were facing the same fear of speaking English, the same doubts about their abilities, and the same rejection when they couldn't articulate themselves clearly in a global language. For Raha, the desire to help others was born from the very challenges she had faced herself. It was not just about teaching English, it was about sharing the key to unlock the doors of opportunity, the same key that had opened her own world. After becoming a fluent speaker, Raha's life took on a new purpose. She no longer wanted to be someone who simply succeeded for herself. She wanted to be the catalyst for success in others. Her personal transformation had inspired a deep need to give back, to help others break free from the barriers that language had once imposed upon her. Raha started small, offering free speaking sessions to the students she knew from college. She remembered the self-doubt she had felt when she had been unable to communicate effectively, and she wanted to make sure others didn't have to experience the same struggles. Initially, she was hesitant. Could she really teach others? Could she pass on the strategies that had worked for her? She wasn't a trained teacher, after all. She had just learned English on her own terms, through hard work and persistence. But her belief in her own experiences pushed her forward. She had conquered her fears, and now it was time to help others do the same. She began with a handful of students, mostly from her college, who also struggled with English. Many of them, like her, had been brilliant in their academic studies but had difficulty speaking fluently or engaging in conversation. Raha's approach was simple. She didn't focus on rigid grammar rules or textbook learning. Instead, she helped her students practice speaking through interactive exercises that allowed them to learn in real-life contexts. She encouraged them to make mistakes because, in her view, mistakes were not failures, they were stepping stones to growth. One of the first students Raha helped was a young man named Arvind, who had recently completed his engineering degree. Arvind was brilliant, but when it came to interviews, he froze. His technical knowledge was impeccable, but his inability to confidently speak in English was his biggest challenge. He had never had to speak English beyond his classroom discussions and had avoided social situations where he would need to converse in the language. Raha began working with Arvind one-on-one. They met at a local cafe every evening, where they would practice conversational English. Raha encouraged him to express his thoughts in simple English first, then gradually expanded the complexity of the sentences. She didn't pressure him to be perfect. Instead, she created an environment where he could speak without fear of judgment. Arvind was initially shy, his words coming out slowly and haltingly, but Raha remained patient and motivating. She made sure to highlight his improvements and encouraged him to keep going. Slowly but surely, Arvind gained more confidence. He no longer feared interviews and started participating in group discussions without hesitation. His breakthrough came when he attended an internship interview at a prestigious firm. It was his first time applying for such a high-profile position, and his nerves were palpable. However, when the interviewer asked him to introduce himself, Arvind spoke with calm confidence. He shared his strengths, his academic journey, and his passion for technology, all in English. When the interviewer commended him for his strong communication skills, Arvind knew that all the effort Raha had put into his learning had paid off. He secured the internship and eventually landed a full-time job. Arvind often credited Raha for helping him find his voice in English, but for Raha, his success was a reminder of how powerful language could be in transforming lives. As word spread about Raha's tutoring sessions, she began to receive more requests for help. It wasn't just college students who needed assistance. There were people of all ages and backgrounds who were eager to learn English. Raha's work grew quickly, and she realized that if she truly wanted to make an impact, she needed to reach as many people as possible. That was when she started to think bigger. She decided to establish a formalized institution, one that could help people of all ages, from students to professionals, in a more structured way. Raha's institution began as a modest center in her hometown, but it quickly gained popularity, and she expanded to multiple cities. Her methods, which combined personal tutoring with interactive learning techniques, proved to be incredibly effective. Students didn't just learn English, they learned how to use the language to communicate confidently, express themselves clearly, and build relationships with people around the world. One of the success stories that came out of this phase was that of Meera, a young girl from a small village who had never been exposed to English before. Meera came from a family of farmers, and her parents didn't see the value in learning English. They believed that the only important skills were those related to farming and managing the household. But Mira was different. She had big dreams of becoming a doctor and helping people in her community. She knew that without strong English skills, she wouldn't be able to pursue her career aspirations. Mira's first encounter with English was overwhelming. She felt lost in the flood of words she didn't understand. But Raha, who had started her institution in the village, was determined to help her. Mira joined the English learning program and started attending daily classes with a group of other village students. The first few months were difficult, and Mira's lack of confidence was palpable. She was shy to speak, afraid of making mistakes in front of others. But Raha encouraged her to keep going, telling her that the process of learning was as important as the destination. Mira's breakthrough came when she was asked to participate in a mock medical interview as part of a class assignment. At first, she hesitated. She was terrified of speaking English in front of her peers. But Raha reassured her, "This is just practice, Mira. Don't worry about getting it perfect. Just speak from your heart." When Mira stepped up to the front of the class, she spoke hesitantly at first, but as she progressed, her words flowed more easily. She talked about her passion for medicine and her desire to help people. Her classmates were impressed by her clarity, and Mira's confidence soared. By the time she graduated from the program, Mira had become one of the top students in her class. Her proficiency in English had not only helped her improve academically but had also opened doors to opportunities she never thought possible. Mira eventually earned a scholarship to study medicine in a city hospital, a dream she once thought was out of reach. She often credited Raha for believing in her when she didn't believe in herself. Mira's success was a testament to the transformative power of language, and Raha couldn't have been prouder. As Raha's work expanded, she began to work with people of all ages, from young students to working professionals. One of the most gratifying aspects of her teaching was helping older individuals who had never had the chance to learn English before. She worked with a 45-year-old shopkeeper named Harvinder, who had never learned English as a child. Harvinder's business was struggling because he couldn't communicate with tourists who visited his shop. His inability to understand basic phrases in English was costing him customers. Harvinder was initially intimidated by the idea of learning English. At his age, he had never imagined he would be able to speak the language confidently, but Raha encouraged him, emphasizing that learning English wasn't about age, it was about determination. Harvinder started attending evening classes with others in his age group, and his progress was slow but steady. Raha worked with him on basic conversational phrases, helping him with greetings, directions, and common phrases used in customer interactions. Over time, Harvinder gained the confidence to speak English with his customers. His business began to thrive again, and he was even able to attract international clients. Harvinder was overjoyed by how learning English had transformed his life, and he often shared his story with others who were hesitant to take the first step. Raha's success stories grew by the day. She didn't just teach English, she helped people gain confidence, find new opportunities, and break down the barriers that had once held them back. Whether it was Arvind, who found success in his job interviews, Meera, who went on to pursue a medical career, or Harvinder, who revived his business, every success story reinforced Raha's belief in the power of language to change lives. As the years passed, Raha's institution became a beacon of hope for people from all walks of life. Her work didn't just teach English, it inspired people to dream bigger, to overcome their limitations, and to believe in themselves. Her legacy grew, not just in the classrooms she had built, but in the lives of the thousands of people whose futures had been transformed by the language she had once struggled to master. And for Raha, each success story, each student who gained confidence, was a reminder of her own journey. She had once been the one who had struggled, who had faced rejection and fear. But now, she was the one who could help others break through those same barriers, and in doing so, she had found a purpose greater than her own success. She had found the power to change lives, one word at a time. Chapter 4: Expanding Horizons. Raha's journey to international success. Raha's journey was nothing short of extraordinary. After years of building a successful English learning institution in her home country, she was ready to take her mission to the global stage. The drive to help others overcome the same language barrier that had once held her back burned brightly within her. But this was no easy feat. Expanding internationally would bring new challenges, both personally and professionally. Raha's vision for her institution had always been grand. From the moment she launched her YouTube channel and offered free courses to the underprivileged, she knew that language could change lives. As the years passed, her institution grew exponentially across cities in her country. Students from different backgrounds began to see remarkable improvements in their spoken English. But Raha wasn't content with just local success. She knew that there were countless others across the world, in different countries and cultures, who also faced language barriers. The thought of helping them fueled her ambition to create international learning institutions. Raha started by researching which countries had the greatest demand for English education. The first places that came to mind were nations where English wasn't the primary language, but where global communication and access to international business required fluency. She turned her attention to regions like the Middle East, Southeast Asia, and parts of Africa. However, expanding internationally was a daunting task. The most significant challenge was the cultural and educational differences. Each country had its own approach to education, and languages varied, making it difficult to design a one-size-fits-all curriculum. The difficulty of adapting her system to different cultural expectations and learning styles was a major hurdle. Raha had to make difficult decisions, such as choosing whether to open physical branches or rely on online platforms to reach her international audience. Financial constraints were another challenge. Setting up institutions required capital, local partnerships, and government approval in foreign countries. Raha's international expansion plan required thorough research, local language expertise, and a sustainable model to ensure success. To ensure her programs were culturally sensitive, Raha collaborated with local educators who understood the nuances of their respective languages and cultures. She didn't just want to teach English, she wanted to build a bridge between cultures. She focused on understanding the difficulties faced by non-native speakers in different countries and adjusted her teaching techniques accordingly. One such adjustment was in the Middle East, where students had a strong grasp of written English but struggled with conversation. Raha implemented more immersive techniques, like conversation clubs and online language exchange programs, so students could practice English in real-world situations. She also partnered with local schools and universities, offering them tailored curriculum packages that aligned with their existing education systems. However, even with these adjustments, there were still many cultural misunderstandings that cropped up. Raha had to continuously adapt her teaching methodologies and business model to fit the needs of each new country she entered. In one country, for example, students were not used to the interactive, student-centered approach she promoted. They preferred a more traditional lecture-style model. It was a struggle, but Raha's determination to stay true to her vision helped her find the balance between respect for tradition and her modern approach. Raha's breakthrough came when she made her first major international partnership with a government-backed educational initiative in a Southeast Asian country. The government, recognizing the value of improving English fluency, agreed to integrate Raha's curriculum into public school systems. This was a huge achievement. Raha's program reached thousands of students across the country, and the results were immediate. Students began speaking with more confidence, and their improved English opened up new opportunities for higher education and employment. The success of this partnership allowed Raha to expand even further. She created more branches in Southeast Asia, the Middle East, and Africa. Each new branch was tailored to the specific needs of the local population. In some countries, Raha used her institution to offer not just English courses, but also courses on business communication, cross-cultural leadership, and even basic computer literacy. The variety of subjects helped her reach different demographics, from school children to adults seeking career advancement. Raha's expansion was not without setbacks. One of the most memorable challenges came when she attempted to set up a branch in Europe. Initially, she faced fierce competition from long-established institutions, and the market was saturated with well-known language schools. Her model of affordable, interactive, and culturally sensitive learning didn't resonate with the market in the way she had hoped. Despite her best efforts, the European expansion ultimately failed, teaching her a valuable lesson in market research and adaptability. However, not all failures were as costly. Raha once had a partnership with a tech company in Africa to launch an online platform for rural areas. Unfortunately, the project faced technological difficulties, and the platform's reach was limited due to unreliable internet connections in some remote areas. While the initiative didn't succeed, Raha learned the importance of assessing infrastructure before committing to large-scale projects. Despite the failures, Raha's successes far outweighed them. Her partnerships with schools, governments, and organizations continued to grow, bringing more and more students into the fold. The impact she had on individuals' lives was immeasurable. From young students who could now dream of attending universities abroad, to adults who found better job prospects, Raha's work was changing the world. Raha's international institutions became known not just for their academic success, but for their focus on making education accessible to all. She partnered with international organizations to fund scholarships for underprivileged students, ensuring that financial constraints never stood in the way of a student's potential. With every country she entered, Raha expanded her influence, reaching millions of people. Her ability to adapt, learn from failure, and stay true to her mission made her one of the most influential educational leaders of her time. As she stood in the various countries she had worked so hard to impact, Raha realized her dream of creating an international learning institution had become a reality. Her legacy was not only in the institutions she had built but also in the countless individuals whose lives had been changed by the power of language. She had not just taught English, she had helped build bridges between cultures, one word at a time, and for Raha, that was the true success. Chapter 5: Spreading the Word, Raha's empowerment through seminars, social media, and daily engagement. Raha had always believed that language could change lives, but she soon realized that simply teaching English wasn't enough. She wanted to inspire, motivate, and build confidence in her students. As her institution grew and her influence expanded, Raha began to understand the power of reaching people on a deeper level. She wanted to connect not only with the students in her classrooms but with people across the world, especially those who struggled to find the motivation to speak or even listen in English. It was this realization that led to the birth of her seminars, social media engagement, and her popular YouTube series, Daily Dose of Vocab. Raha understood the importance of motivation when it came to learning a new language. Without motivation, the learning process could be long and frustrating. This was particularly true for those who felt overwhelmed by the idea of learning a language that wasn't native to them. She wanted to remove the barriers to speaking and make English feel like an accessible and empowering tool. This sparked the idea of her first major public seminar. Her seminars were designed to not only teach English but to also build self-belief in her students. She began hosting motivational seminars across the country, as well as in other parts of the world. At these events, she would address hundreds, sometimes thousands, of individuals who were eager to learn English but lacked the confidence to start. Raha's speeches were filled with personal anecdotes, powerful quotes, and affirmations designed to uplift and inspire. She often spoke about her own struggles with English in her early years and how persistence and self-belief had helped her overcome those challenges. Her words resonated with her audience because they saw in her someone who had once stood where they were, uncertain, unsure, and struggling to communicate. One of her most famous quotes, "Your voice is your power, don't let fear steal it," became a mantra for many of her followers. Raha wasn't just teaching English. She was teaching her audience to embrace their potential, step out of their comfort zones, and take ownership of their ability to communicate. Each seminar ended with a powerful, uplifting call to action. Speak today, speak tomorrow, and keep speaking until you feel the change. As her seminars grew in popularity, Raha took her message to social media, expanding her reach even further. She understood the importance of meeting her students where they were, and for millions around the world, that was on social media. Whether it was Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter, Raha made sure to create content that inspired her followers to take action. Her posts were filled with motivational messages, real-life success stories, and tips on improving English speaking skills. She used her platforms to engage in live sessions, answering questions, giving language tips, and offering real-time support to those struggling with their learning journeys. Raha's posts weren't just about grammar, rules or vocabulary lists. They were about mental shifts, the understanding that anyone, no matter their background or where they started, could become fluent in English with persistence and practice. Through videos, motivational posts, and stories, she showed people that learning English wasn't a linear process. It was about consistency, effort, and the belief that change was possible. But it wasn't just social media that allowed Raha to make a lasting impact. She knew that, to truly reach people, they needed to interact with the language regularly. This understanding led her to create Daily Dose of Vocab *, a YouTube series dedicated to helping viewers expand their vocabulary in a fun and engaging way. Every day, she uploaded a short video featuring a word or phrase, explaining its meaning, offering examples of how to use it in conversation, and encouraging her viewers to incorporate it into the daily lives. The impact of Daily Dose of Vocab * was immense. With thousands of subscribers from around the world, Raha's channel became an invaluable resource for English learners of all levels. Her viewers weren't just learning new words, they were practicing their listening skills, becoming more confident in their ability to understand spoken English, and learning how to apply these new words in real-world situations. The simplicity and consistency of the channel made it easy for learners to incorporate it into the daily routines, and the positive feedback from her subscribers motivated them to keep going. One of the most impactful elements of the daily dose of vocab * was how Raha made English learning feel approachable. Her personality shone through in every video. She was warm, encouraging, and relatable. She broke down complex words into easy-to-understand concepts, making them feel less intimidating. Over time, her subscribers began to share their progress in the comments, posting about how they had used the new words in conversations or how much more confident they felt in their speaking abilities. Raha had created a virtual community of English learners who supported each other's growth, exchanging tips, success stories, and challenges. Alongside her online presence, Raha also organized workshops that combined her teaching methods with her motivational approach. These workshops were intensive, hands-on experiences where students had the chance to practice speaking English in small groups. Raha made sure that every workshop was interactive, ensuring that each participant had the opportunity to speak and receive feedback. She often used role-playing exercises, debates, and storytelling activities to create real-life scenarios that helped students overcome their fear of speaking. The workshops were designed to empower individuals to speak English confidently, whether in casual conversations or professional settings. Raha's approach was simple yet effective. The more you speak, the better you get. She encouraged her students to embrace mistakes, not as failures, but as part of the learning process. She often reminded them that even the best speakers were once beginners, and that the key to becoming fluent was perseverance and practice. The result was evident. Many students who attended her workshops went on to become frequent English speakers, integrating the language into their everyday lives. Some even went on to take leadership roles in their careers, using their newly acquired language skills to connect with people from all over the world. The impact of Raha's teachings extended far beyond just the language. She had instilled in them a sense of self-belief and the understanding that they were capable of achieving the dreams, no matter their starting point. Through her seminars, social media engagement, daily dose of vocab * YouTube channel, and workshops, Raha had created a movement, a community of motivated learners who were no longer afraid to speak, listen, and grow. She had shown them that with the right mindset, dedication, and support, learning English was not just a possibility, but an empowering journey that could open doors to endless opportunities. And for Raha, seeing her students transform into confident English speakers was the ultimate reward, proving that language was not just about words, but about unlocking the potential within each individual.